Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA fined me for my handicap RV in my own driveway. I sued them for $280,000. Now, I know most people do not like any kinds of HOAs. I do not necessarily dislike them, but I do not love them either. However, an experience with a terrible HOA president left a bad taste in my mouth. My husband and I take care of our disabled daughter, who is in her 20s. My daughter unfortunately suffers from a plethora of health issues and disabilities, and thus has to rely on us for medical care and assistance. We do not mind at all. As a matter of fact, we do our best to make sure my daughter's life is easier, and that she has everything she needs. She suffers from Down syndrome, and without going into too much detail, she has several other health issues that cause her to experience incontinence and an upset stomach. She also had various doctor's appointments throughout the weeks, and as some of her health issues worsened, we had purchased a small RV to make traveling to these appointments earlier. She would never have to worry about being near a bathroom, or having extra clothes, or being able to shower if she were out. While some may argue that buying an RV was extreme, we had the money to do so, and it really helped with her confidence. If she had an accident, she had a shower, restroom, and change of clothes all available to her. As a matter of fact, sometimes when the RV was parked in our driveway, she would go out there to hang out and bask in the peace and quiet. The RV really meant a lot to her. However, the HOA was quick to tell us that we were not allowed to have the RV in our driveway. There were no rules that had been previously made that prevented someone from buying an RV, so I was confused as to where this came from. One of the reasons we were more inclined to buy the RV was because we were under the assumption we could have it, as long as we parked it in our driveway and not on the street. I had written back to the HOA and let them know that the RV was necessary for my daughter, as it made her life a lot easier and helped with travel arrangements when constantly going to doctors. However, the HOA did not budge. As a matter of fact, they had told us that our 20-foot RV was too big to park at their home and violated the neighborhood's covenants. I had politely explained to them the situation with my daughter again, and even explained the fact that there was nothing in the agreement regarding the HOA we signed that suggested we could not have an RV in our driveway. Again, the HOA did not budge. I was really disappointed by this, if we were being honest. I did not consider myself to be an entitled person, but my daughter had a medical condition, and the RV really did help with her outlook on things and quality of life. However, the HOA once again threatened us. If we did not get rid of the RV within a week, we would have to pay a hefty fine. I was not willing to give up the RV, or park it in storage or anything like that. That defeated the purpose of the RV. So, I felt like I had no other choice than to pack everything up and move. It was a devastating decision to leave the house we all loved, but I just wanted to make sure that my daughter had what she needed. In our new neighborhood, there was also an HOA which I was nervous about. But the house we found was spacious and seemed to be in safer part of the city. Before we purchased the house, we explained to them the situation with our daughter and the RV. We even provided documents that proved we used the RV to travel to doctor's appointments. The new HOA immediately approved us for parking the RV in the driveway, and they were actually genuinely nice. Because of this, I determined that the previous HOA's excuse to not allow us to have the RV was just straight up BS and decided to file a lawsuit for medical discrimination. Upon investigation and preparing myself for the legal case, I discovered that technically, the HOA must be willing to provide reasonable accommodation in my daughter's case. I specifically stated this when filing my case and getting lawyers involved. It took about a year of back and forth, coming from the HOA's side, but we finally won our case. In the end, the judge determined that the HOA pay a fine of $278,000 towards us, for causing us to move out of our homes, and for not accepting our request to have the RV in the driveway. It has been a long journey, and I feel terribly for my daughter who has faced the effects of stress caused by this ordeal, but I am proud to be a voice for the disabled community and will speak up in the future if I see anything wrong. Besides that, the money was a great asset in us remodeling the RV and providing some disabled-friendly updates to it. Screw you, previous HOA. The next story is titled, Dear Sir, Please Remove Your Fence. While retrieving my mail shortly after moving into my new home, there was a flyer attached to the mailbox post. I read the flyer with interest, finding that it was from the neighbor who purchased the model home at the entrance of our subdivision. The flyer was addressed to all members of the Homeowners Association and essentially informed us that the HOA was using our HOA dues to sue him for not removing a fence from his front yard. The builder erected the chestnut rail fence around the front yard of the model home when it was built, and the purchaser never thought anything about it. A contingent of HOA officers notified him that he had 24 hours to remove the fence or face a lawsuit. Having already faced the wrath of the HOA myself, I stopped at his home to talk with him. After ascertaining the preceding information, I informed him that anything existing on the closing date of the real estate transfer was grandfathered in and therefore, the fence was legal. I then proceeded to show this to him in the covenants. At the time, I was an editor with the local newspaper and asked if he minded my writing an article about this incident in the newspaper. He readily agreed and I went off to discuss it with the managing editor. Between us, we decided to run a series of articles about HOAs and the little Hitlers who run them, highlighting this incident. The series ran 7 weeks on the editorial page, during which time, the court case was held, and the homeowner won with the HOA having to pay his legal expenses. He told me that had they asked, he would have removed the fence with no problem, but he was a retired colonel in the U.S. Army and was not used to being ordered to do things. 36 years later, the fence is still there. The next story is titled, Karen Declares War on My Parents for Cutting a Tree Down on Their Own Property. I, 25 male, have been living away from home ever since graduating from college. My parents both retired recently and last summer they decided to use some of the money they'd saved up to finally build their dream retirement home in New Orleans, where they've been living for the past 10 years. I come from a very tight-knit family, so I still talk to my parents every week, and they were so excited when they said they'd already picked out the location where they wanted the house built. It was an empty lot in a nice neighborhood where a house had been demolished not long before due to age, and the previous owner, who was pretty wealthy and owned numerous properties around the city, decided that the lot was worth more without the house on it. Anyway, my parents snapped it up as soon as it came on the market, but not long after construction began, they realized that they were building their dream house right next door to the lair of a wild Karen. The trouble started when my parents had to cut down a large oak tree that sat in the front of the lot. It was a real beauty, too, one of those big southern live oaks, and although they didn't want to, they knew they had to remove it because it was in the way. No one likes to cut down a big, beautiful tree, and believe me, if there was a way to avoid doing it without impeding the construction, my parents would have taken it. So, they called a tree removal service, and the tree was soon gone. Well, a few days after the tree had been cut down, my dad was on the property talking to some of the construction guys and making sure everything was going smoothly. He was going back to his car when he saw a woman in her late 50s walk out of the house next door and head to her mailbox. My dad, let's call him John, is a pretty chill and laid-back guy who likes to be on good terms with everyone, so he walked over and introduced himself. "Hi," he said, holding out his hand. "My name's John and my wife and I are going to be your neighbors once our house is finished. I just wanted to come over and say hi and introduce myself. It's nice to meet you. What's your name?" Karen glanced at the extended hand, then looked up at my dad and glared at him. "My name is none of your business," she snapped. "I'm not going to shake your hand because of COVID, and even if there was no COVID, I still wouldn't shake your hand because you people ruined my life when you cut down my tree. I still can't believe how selfish you are. You should both be ashamed of yourselves." My dad was taken aback by this and pointed out that Karen already had a nice big oak tree in her backyard, but Karen ignored him and stalked back inside her house. She never explained why she thought she was the owner of the tree that had been cut down, not once, and whenever my parents asked about it, she refused to answer. I guess it's just one of those things we'll never know, like what really happened to the lost Roanoke colony or the fate of D.B. Cooper. My parents met some of their other neighbors later that day, including a nice elderly couple who lived in the other house next door Karen's, and when my dad told them what happened, the neighbors said Karen was like that to everyone and no one in the neighborhood liked her. They also said that Karen had been nasty to them for a long time, and they were in the process of selling their house because they couldn't stand living next door to her anymore. Karen soon began living up to her reputation. For months, whenever my parents would visit the house to see how the construction was coming along, she'd find something to complain or confront them about. One time she said the construction workers were being too loud and threatened to call the police, even though it was the middle of the day. Another time she said that the construction company was using illegal immigrants as cheap labor and threatened to call ICE and have the whole project shut down. My dad mentioned this to the owner of the company, and the owner sent Karen a formal letter threatening a lawsuit if she tried. I don't know if there were any actual grounds for a lawsuit, but the threat must have worked because ICE never showed up. Oh, and then there was the time she tried to have my parents' car towed for illegal parking when they parked by the curb of their still unfinished house. The first my parents knew about this was when the tow truck showed up, but the driver took one look at where my parents' car was parked and told Karen he'd send her a bill for wasting his time if she called him again. I could go on. Karen did everything she could think of to try and interfere. She was absolutely relentless in her crusade to avenge a tree she never even owned. Happily, the house was completed despite her best efforts and my parents finally moved in not long after the holidays. My mom told me later that she caught Karen watching them bitterly from her window as they were taking some of their boxes inside. She was concerned that Karen might keep going and try something else, but I guess Karen was too busy wallowing in self-pity over her failure or something because things were actually quiet for a while. But a few weeks ago, things changed. New Orleans has had some really bad weather lately due to the winter storms that are battering much of the southern US right now, and one night, one of those storms was so powerful that it knocked over the tree in Karen's backyard. It missed falling onto her house, but it didn't miss falling onto her shiny new Jaguar and crushing it like a beer can. According to my folks, Karen didn't discover what happened until the following morning. When she came outside and saw the pile of scrap metal that used to be her car, she threw back her head and let out a primal scream like something out of The Exorcist. She had to pay a tree removal service to get rid of the tree, and then she had to pay for a tow truck to get rid of the car too, and then she had to get a rental car too. Karen put her property up for sale and moved out not long afterward. Everyone in the neighborhood was glad to see her go, and my parents enjoyed watching her drive off into the sunset from the front porch of their amazing new house. Edit. For clarification, Karen did not sell her house right away, she put it on the market and moved out of it as soon as she could. I don't know where she is now, but I'm guessing she's staying somewhere else while she waits for someone to buy the property. I don't know if anyone has bought it yet, but since there's a pandemic going on I think she'll be waiting for some time. The last story is titled, "Threatened to hit me with your car? Good luck getting your car out." I was reading a post today that reminded me of something that happened back in 2009. Both of my sons were in middle school and high school, old enough to stay home by themselves. I worked the 5 to close shift at the local chain hair salon. We lived in a condo and my neighbors were notorious for stealing someone's shoved parking space. I knew someone was going to take my spot and asked my youngest son if he would start to shovel my spot out when I called to tell him I was on my way home. I told him it was worth $20, and he was happy to do it. I called him at 9:05 p.m. and he went out to get to work. We had about 6 inches of snow on the ground, and he only needed to shovel enough for my tires to hit blacktop and for me to get out of the car. I get home and I see him standing there and no cleared space. I did see a shiny new BMW parked where he said he was going to shovel out for me. I got out of the car, and I asked him what had happened. This boy burst into tears and told me some women drove up while he was cleaning out the space and threatened to run him over if he did not move and let her park where he had just spent 20 minutes shoveling for me. He told her he was shoveling for his mom who would be there in 5 minutes. She started honking and cursing at him to move. She actually drove the front bumper of her car into him and was threatening him with the car. She almost hit a 12-year-old with her car just so she could have a clear parking spot to park her BMW in. The best part, she did not even live there. She was someone's guest and was supposed to park in the guest parking spot. I parked down in the next lot and walked back to the condo. My son had gone inside and calmed down by then. I checked and he was not injured, just mad and scared. I told him it was not worth someone almost hitting him with their car over a snow-free parking space. I gave him the $20 and told him some people are just evil and to forget about it. I wanted to call the police, but I knew it was rich bitches, RB, word against a 12-year-old since I had not seen what had happened. We did not live in the best area and the cops mostly could not be bothered with us lesser humans. Since the next day was a snow day, no school, my boys were up playing video games, and my 12-year-old told his brother who was 14 what had happened. My oldest son came out and asked me if what his brother said was true about the woman trying to hit him with her car over a parking spot, and I told him to go look outside for himself. My oldest comes in and asks me what we were going to do about RB. I told him growing up in Baltimore City, if someone stole your spot in front of your house like that, we would just shovel them in to teach them a lesson. My oldest got this look on his face and told his brother to get his coat and boots on and to grab a shovel. Those boys spent from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. shoveling this woman's car in. They packed so much snow around her car all you could see was the roof. They took snow from all over the parking lot to pack around her car. I know I should not have laughed or encouraged them, but I felt it was justice that RB bullied a 12-year-old boy and got her car almost completely packed in with snow. Her car sat there like that for 3 days until the snow started to melt and no one figured out my kids had done it. Maybe next time the RB will think twice about bullying a child for a parking spot in the winter. Thanks for listening.